future. Now, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is calling on more nations to recognize Jerusalem as the country's capital. His comments come as the United States moves its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. A U.S. delegation, including the American president's daughter, Ivanka Trump, has traveled to Israel to attend today's opening ceremony. However, Palestinians bitterly oppose the relocation of the American embassy as they hope Jerusalem's Israeli-occupied eastern half will one day be the capital of a state of their own. Well, for more on this, I'm joined from Melbourne by Dr. Colin Rubenstein, Executive Director of the Australia, Israel and Jewish Affairs. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Now, this decision is more than just a political decision. Explain to us what this actually means to the Jewish diaspora.
Well, it corrects an historical anomaly. Jerusalem, of course, is the heart and soul of the Jewish people and Jewish history. When it's been a capital, it's always been a Jewish capital, with the exception perhaps of the Crusader period. It's been the capital of the sovereign state of Israel for nearly 70 years. And so every sovereign country is entitled to nominate its own capital, except in the case of Israel, it seems. So this is really a profoundly important decision. It actually enforces US law pioneered by President Clinton in 1995, not only recognising Jerusalem as the capital, but to move the embassy, most importantly. President Trump was elected on that pledge, and of course he said he would do it. And of course, with this act today and the historic opening of the embassy, that's what he achieves.
I must point out, though, that not everyone in the Jewish community agrees with the move. There are those who say that the political establishment of a capital is not actually in accordance to God's will. What do you say to that?
Well, I say that they're very much fringe people. There's overwhelming consensus, not only in Israel, but the Jewish world, about the importance of this move in rectifying even the contemporary attempts to rewrite history, writing Jerusalem out of Jewish history. We see that even in UN and UNESCO resolutions and part of the Palestinian campaign to delegitimize Israel. I think it's very important to say, of course, that this move by President Trump is very measured and specific. It by no means rules out the possibility that if the Palestinians go back to negotiations, which they've been unprepared to do for almost 4 years now, the possibility of not only a Palestinian state, but their capital in East Jerusalem or the Jerusalem environs is absolutely not ruled out by this decision. And so a lot of the critics are just totally wrong on this point.
But now, since the announcement was made in December of last year, we've already seen Palestinians protesting this particular move. We have been warned that there may be more violence expected today and the coming weeks over this particular decision by Washington. Has this decision basically left the Middle East conflict negotiations in the dust?
I doubt that's the case. I mean, firstly, the response from the broader Arab world has been quite muted. And furthermore, of course, this could be an incentive for cooler heads to prevail. Not dealing with the United States, whether it's the Palestinians or let's say Iran, it's not really going to work out very successfully in terms of promoting their interests. If they're interested in establishing a Palestinian state alongside Israel, rather than instead of Israel, which of course is the goal of extremists, terrorists and groups like Hamas, we're very open about it, then they should come back to negotiations. And as the President said in his statement, what the parties agree between themselves is something he'll go along with, which precisely is the possibility, by the way, that Israel has already offered on several occasions in the last 17 years of a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. And of course we know what Arafat and President Abbas have done. They've simply walked away from those offers. So there's a bigger problem impeding progress towards a two-state outcome. And what the President has done is recognise the reality that Jerusalem actually is the working capital of the State of Israel. That's where the Knesset is. That's where presidents and prime ministers go to meet with their counterparts. And so it's a very important step forward. It's a reassertion of American leadership and credibility. And my hope is that going forward, that it will actually encourage more pragmatic Palestinians interested in a compromise and real negotiations towards a two-state outcome.
But surely you can understand their fears and their anxiety, though. We've already seen hundreds of settlers raiding the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. It is the third holiest site in Islam. Is this a signal that Palestinians who live in Jerusalem will soon be pushed out of their own homes?
There's no such possibility at all. It's not a signal to that effect. The Islamic authorities control the Islamic facilities in East Jerusalem.
But we have seen the raids on Al-Aqsa Mosque, though. And they've been growing in frequency too.
The hotheads, of course, will use this as a pretext to do what they've been doing. That's to incite violence, extremism, but to cave in to that extremism and terrorism is not the way forward.
Some would say that establishing Jerusalem as the capital, or recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, will actually feed into the Israeli or Jewish extremism.
Well, not going ahead, of course, would do exactly that, would be my argument. And the President, of course, has stood up to these threats. We'll see what happens the day after. Of course, no one can predict what will happen today and in the next few days. Every effort will be made on every front to inflame the situation by those who are opposed not only to this move of the embassy, but to Israel's very existence. But I think that the forces, more calmer and more reasoned forces down the track will prevail, and the possibility of resuming negotiations towards hopefully a better mutually acceptable outcome will be the end product of the President actually rectifying an historic wrong and showing a sovereign nation the respect and dignity that it deserves in being able to name its own capital and have that recognised by the countries of the world. And of course a number of countries are already following the President's example, and one would hope that more will do so in the months and days ahead.
Dr. Rubenstein, what would a Palestinian state look like to you?
Well, it's very obvious what it would look like. It's been offered by Israel on 3 occasions, by Prime Minister Barak and by Prime Minister Olmert. We're talking about a very substantial component of the West Bank territories and Gaza. Of course, we have a problem in that those 2 entities are under control of different wings of the Palestinian movement. Of Hamas in Gaza, opposed to Israel's very existence, as we know, and the Palestinian Authority on the West Bank, which is more interested in that outcome, but which refuses to even negotiate over the last 3 to 4 years, instead pursuing a unilateral strategy to delegitimize Israel. Hopefully, moving ahead, we'll find a Palestinian leadership that will be able to come back to the negotiating table and pursue the outcome which every seasoned observer of the Middle East knows, a Palestinian state on the West Bank and Gaza with the potential of a capital in Jerusalem, providing it's an end of conflict resolution and a Palestinian state that will live in peace and amity alongside Israel rather than one that's determined to actually destroy it.
Dr. Colin Rubenstein, thank you so much for joining us.